Hey, Coach Nikki here with the second session of Winning in Marriage After Infidelity. Today we're going to deal with the problem. Last week we talked about making a decision, and I guess you made a decision because you're back here with me for a second week. So you and your spouse have made a decision to stay together, and that's wonderful. So today, dealing with the problem, most times infidelity has absolutely nothing to do with your spouse. It has absolutely nothing to do with a spouse who is not cheating. It has everything to do with an identity crisis, with knowing who you are and knowing what you want to do. 9 times out of 10, when I talk to people about infidelity, when we really get down to the core of things, it's about someone trying to maintain their independence, about someone not wanting to allow someone to change who they are. And I don't think anybody goes into a marriage to change their spouse. Well, I take that back. Some people do go into it. You're never going to change somebody. Just a little side note, that's for free. But usually the partner who is cheating is fighting for independence in the relationship. And so immaturity has a lot to do with that. People make excuses for infidelity like, I'm not getting enough attention, or the person outside of the marriage who's pursuing me has so much more than my spouse, and do I stay with my spouse who only makes $25,000 a year versus dealing with somebody who makes $100,000 a year? But if they're a serial killer or crazy, what difference does it make? Anywho, that's another story. But these are the excuses that I hear. There's never a legitimate reason for cheating. And the reason there's no legitimate reason for cheating is because we are adults. You're a grown-up. And so if you're not happy in your marriage, if you don't like how things are going, and you've talked to your spouse and your spouse doesn't seem to get it, and you guys can't make it work, there's a little thing called divorce, a separation. Just leave. But the reason why people don't leave is because cheating is just an excuse. It's that person's issue. It's not the other spouse's issue. They don't. Usually, 9 times out of 10, the cheater, they don't want to leave their spouse. I've seen men and women do it. They'll go tell the side chick or side dude, well, my spouse is not doing this, and I'm going to leave them when the kids grow up. Kids are 37 and 38. Or I'm going to leave them as soon as I make enough money. Well, if you ain't made enough money to take care of yourself by now, then something really wrong with you. Has nothing to do with your spouse. So those are just a few things that, people make up or whatever. That's Mac, my dog. Sorry, you guys. But the problem is usually always self-identity and insecurity. And so with that being said, it's for the spouse who cheats. I really wish I could think of another word for the spouse who cheats. I just can't right now. So for right now, that's what we're going to use. The spouse who cheats really needs to sit down and admit what they've done. And in dealing with the problem, the spouse who did not cheat is going to have several questions about what happened and how it happened and where it happened and how long it happened. And so I suggest that as the spouse who has broken trust in the relationship, to gain trust back, you need to sit down and tell the truth. Tell the truth about how it got started and what your reason was for getting started, and give an honest answer, not an answer that blames your spouse, an answer that is honest, where you are concerned. Admit you're wrong, because that's going to help you build trust. Remember, when you're dealing with trust, when you've broken trust, you've basically got to start over. It's not something that we can just pick up where it left off. You really have to start from ground zero to build that trust back. And one way to build that trust back is to be completely honest about what happened and where it happened. And so I know that is a scary thing, because if you tell all the ins and outs, your spouse might then have doubts about staying in the relationship. But that's a chance that you have to take. And if you really love your spouse, you will love them enough to give them the truth. Now, on the flip side, I do not think that you should spend months and months talking about this affair or what happened. I would say take about a week. Let your spouse ask as many questions as he or she needs to ask, and after that week, it's sealed in the vault. We're done with it. We're not asking any more questions. We're not giving any more answers, because it's time to move on. And you cannot move on if you keep discussing and drudging up what went on in the past. And so, while you're doing that, as you're talking about what happened and how the affair happened, then the spouse who done the cheating needs to be honest with their spouse. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Needs to be honest with their spouse and tell them exactly what they need to feel secure and what their identity issues are. Most people who cheat probably have a little bit too much time on their hands. That's usually what it is. And just because you go to work and work an 8-hour or even a 12-hour day, once you leave work and come home, if all you do is have free time and you don't work on building yourself up, reading self-help books, or doing something that's worthwhile for you, mastering your hobbies or your gifts or things like that, then you usually have too much time on your hands to deal with the issues at hand. I don't have that problem. Joke. So the spouse who didn't cheat needs to sit down with the spouse who did and try to put together a new plan, some new boundaries to set, so that you guys can move forward and you don't have to worry about infidelity happening again. And it's really just a matter of saying to yourself, hey, I'm better than this. For the spouse who cheated, I'm better than this. I'm better than spreading myself thin and sneaking around and whispering and erasing text messages and lying and cheating and all that stuff. And when you think about it, it makes you feel like a bad person. It should make you feel like a bad person. Anyway, and like I said, once you think about how would I feel if my spouse done the very exact same things that I have done, usually if you're a decent person, it usually it gets you on the right track. And so the assignment for today would be just to sit down, both spouses, and talk about self-identity. Talk about what your gifts are, what your goals are, what you want to accomplish in the years to come. Because one thing I can tell you, one thing I bet, a person who has a family and they cheat, whether it be a man or a woman, you are not fully taking care of your house. You're not fully taking care of your responsibilities. You're not fully taking care of your family, because you're splitting it with someone else. So if you've got time to hold down a whole boyfriend or a whole girlfriend, you're not taking care of business. And in actuality, you open the door. The door is wide open for your spouse to walk out and leave you. One thing I can say, the spouse who doesn't cheat is a very long-suffering and patient person, because the average spouse knows when something's going on with their spouse. The average spouse knows when you're cheating or something is going on. And you really are a strong person to be able to sit here and say, hey, I'm going to forgive these wrongs that my spouse committed against me, and I'm going to wipe the slate clean, and I'm going to make myself vulnerable to this person again and try to make it work, because we have a covenant. We made a covenant before God. And so with that being said, I believe God. I'm going to say that all the time. I believe God. And so I believe when things like that happen, I believe the spouse who cheated, it is their responsibility to get it right with God. You sinned against God, and so we made a covenant before God, and you broke that covenant. You created a soul tie with someone else. And so for me, in my marriage, my husband had to make it right with God. And he had to repent and denounce all of those soul ties, because that's a whole nother thing that you create when you decide to engage in sexual activity with someone else. So it's a whole big situation. Cheating, people think it's nothing. It is very much something. You bring in different spirits that other people deal with, different demons that other people could be dealing with, and you don't know. You're bringing them in and laying that stuff upon your kids, but that's a whole nother story. I'm not here to preach to you. But so today, the homework is to sit down and be honest about what has happened, where it's happened, who it's happened with, whatever questions that your spouse has. This week, you need to make it your business to answer all of those questions and make your spouse feel as secure as possible. I hate to say it, for a spouse who has cheated, it is your job to just bow down, really, and get on your knees, because you have committed a crime in marriage. And so this week, sit down and be honest. And the spouse who didn't cheat, I pray that you have enough strength to sit down with your spouse and write down some new goals, some new boundaries, and help your spouse figure out who they are as a person so that they feel whole in your relationship. Because this is the one thing, if you do not conquer this, you will deal with it again. You will deal with it. Gary, you can mark my word, if a person does not know who they are, whether it be single or married, they will do it again. People don't like to sin against themselves. And so when you know who you are, you don't hit the side rails. I know I don't want to be over there. When you don't know, when you're looking for who you are, you're trying to find out, oh, am I this person with my spouse, and then I'm somebody else with my side piece? So we want to get rid of all of that. So the homework this week is to sit down, be completely honest, write down some things, some goals, some boundaries that you feel will help your marriage move forward. Deal with the identity issues. Like I said, I always suggest talking to a marriage counselor or talking to a coach. And so if you decide that you can't find a coach or someone to talk to, you can always hit Coach Nikki up. You can inbox me on Facebook on my page at Lifestyle Upgrade Coaching. You can go to my website, /Coach Nikki1on1.com. I know that's long. Or you can hit me up on Instagram, inbox me, send me your questions. I'll be glad to help you out. So until next week, let's stay together, the movement.